Assassin presents
From strategy to decision making.
Can someone please explain chess on the expert level? You know why?
So what is chess on the expert level?
Chess is more than just about strategy, but a multifaceted game that encompasses various aspects, such as decision-making under pressure. Players will also need good observational skills, which stems from psychological insight. Adaptability is another skill that requires a player to change their approach according to the changing circumstances in any given position.
And to put it in a nutshell, this means that problem solving demands a broad range of skills. Now it is time to get into the meat of the lesson. And now I will introduce you to Monk Chess Master Zing. He will present to you the next game illustration and will explain to you what's going on throughout the course of the game.
In this variation of the anti-Queen's Indian, Black needs to understand the potential weaknesses of hanging pawns and must be ready to defend such positions. The player of the defending side must also be able to adjust his approach to changing circumstances. This means informed decision making. Now let's get started without wasting any time. Here we see that both sides will fianchetto their bishops, light square bishops. And from here, you observe where each player castles their king. Most likely Black and White will castle king side. So White's light square bishop is very important if the king is on that side of the board. And Black's dark square bishop is important, very important, because Black's king is castled on that side of the board. Both sides are focused on the e4 square, a light square. And by pawns being on e6 and f7, Black is playing a light square strategy. So White contests the light squares. And as a counter strategy, Black challenges White's pawn on d4 by playing the pawn to c5 to challenge White's pawn center on the dark squares. The pawn that sits on e2 is White's weapon. The goal here is to play the pawn from e2 to e4, gaining space. So the question for Black is, how will he approach challenging White's pawn center? What is his approach for challenging White's pawn center? Notice how the queen is on c2. It is logical for Black to play the pawn to c5 to try to open the c file and swing a rook over to the c file to x-ray White's queen. Very logical. Let's take this position. Let's say White just captured on d5. Should Black recapture with the bishop or with the pawn. Capturing with the bishop gives white a clear advantage since black has no way to fight against the classical center and has to reckon with d4 to d5. For example, after e2, e4, bishop b7, rook over to d1, and white has the classical mobile pawn center. The move is to capture with the e-pawn. And after rook over to d1, black has some choices, either c5 or knight f6. c6 is passive here. As a result of c6, white plays a timely e4. Recommended is c5 instead. For instance, after c6, pawn to e4, and black can capture d4, queen e4, followed by knight f6. And the game continues with queen c2, and later black follows up with c5. Now let's take this position for example. After knight to e5, black plays pawn from c7 to c5, and black captures with either the bishop or the pawn. All of this in view of the pressure that white applies due to the rook being on the d file. Are you able to understand the results of your choice? Capturing with the pawn leads to a position with hanging pawns. Pawns on d5 and c5 are hanging pawns. So, after c5, d takes on c5, black recaptures with the bishop. Here, however, black does have an isolated pawn on d5. Remember when I said earlier that a player needs to know how to adjust his approach to changing circumstances? Black, by having the isolated d-pawn, sees that white can either try to get a knight on d4 to blockade the pawn, but white's knight is on d3. If the knight was on d4, this would have upheld the Aaron Nimzovich principle of blockading the pawn to attack it later.
Thank you very much, Monk Chessmaster Zing. Appreciate your contribution. That is all I have for now. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned.